Deep in the heart of the forest, a stone throne rests in silence. From its surface emerges a dark and sinister figure, an embodiment of pure evil that spreads a suffocating presence across the surroundings. Our story begins with the final thoughts of the main character, Aruto. At just 18 years old, his life was marked by endless battles against illness. Now, with death tightening its grip, he feels frustration, but also a strange calm acceptance of his fate. As his consciousness fades into darkness, something brushes against his fingers. In those final agonizing moments, the sensation lingers. Was it the softness of grass? Or the rough edge of stone? Light slowly pushes through the void, surrounding him. The sound of leaves rustling drifts into his ears, pulling him back. Confused, Aruto opens his eyes, only to find himself seated upon a stone structure, in a place he does not recognize. A single thought crosses his mind. Could this be the realm where souls arrive after leaving the world of the living? The coldness of the place sends chills down his spine as he carefully scans his surroundings, breathing in the crisp freshness of the air. Suddenly, from the woods, a mysterious girl steps forward. His eyes widen in shock. There's something strangely familiar about her outfit. Struggling to process the resemblance, he hesitantly calls out to her, "Atu." To his surprise, the girl responds with deep respect, addressing him as her king. Takuto's gaze locks on the black dress she's wearing, and his heart skips a beat. He knows it instantly. It's the exact outfit from the video game Eternal Nations. That game was all about managing a kingdom, forming alliances with different groups, and using careful planning to rise above rivals in a fantasy world. And now, standing right in front of him, Atu wasn't just any character. She was one of the powerful hero units from that game. For Takuto, the game had always been his escape, especially during those long days tied to medication after his parents stopped visiting him. Immersed in its complex systems and endless strategy, he could momentarily forget the crushing loneliness that weighed on him. In the end, Takuto achieved something extraordinary. He climbed to the very top of the rankings, earning the title of a legendary player. His victory was thanks to the powerful unit, Atu, and all of it happened before his untimely death. But now, in what he believes to be the afterlife, Atu stands right before his eyes. Stunned and confused, Takuto struggles to understand why she is here, and why someone like her could even exist in this place. To Takuto's confusion, the girl lets out a gentle chuckle and tells him to calm down. She praises his extraordinary talent, especially his incredible feat of being the first player ever to clear nightmare difficulty while leading the hardest nation, the civilization of Ruin Minogra. She acknowledges him as a legendary player, leaving Takuto stunned. He quickly asks how she could possibly know about his gaming achievements. With a bright smile, she answers that she remembers everything Takuto-sama once told her. The victories where they conquered the world together, and the defeats they endured as well. She assures him not to worry. In that moment, he recalls how deeply she understood his policies and his unique play style. Takuto admits that because of his frail body, he always dreamed of becoming someone like her. Feeling thankful for the conversation, he asks if this place is heaven, and if she was the one who brought him here. She gently shakes her head, explaining that it doesn't feel like heaven to her. From the moment she arrived, this new world has resembled the world of Eternal Nations in many ways. Takuto is taken aback when he hears her mention an unknown world. With respect, she admits it might sound cliché, but suggests to Takuto-sama that they should begin a new life together in this place. Though shocked by her offer, Takuto stays silent. She reassures him that she's ready to begin again by his side, building their kingdom in this strange new world. Takuto thinks it over, weighing the possibilities now that he finally has a body free from weakness. Wanting to test this newfound strength, he suggests they create their own nation, a kingdom built just for the two of them. She immediately agrees, and for the first time, her full name is revealed. Atu the Sludge, the bastard child born from the world-ruining mud. Suddenly, a system message appears. It declares that a new game has begun, with Takuto as the player, the civilization set as Monobra, and the alignment marked as evil. Yet, the true difficulty level of this game remains unknown. Both Takuto and Atu feel a wave of embarrassment as they officially begin this new journey, but they agree it's the right path forward. Takuto turns to her and asks if she remembers the goals of their evil nation, Mon Minogra. To lead the world into destruction, their first step is already clear. Fans who remember the game know that only one player had ever managed to clear it with this nation, using a hidden and secretive playstyle. The condition is to adopt what's called a shoe-in lifestyle. Even though Monobra is labeled the most evil nation, Its civilization trait specializes in internal administration, leaving it at a disadvantage in combat. This makes it a super-specialized country, one that focuses almost entirely on domestic affairs. Then suddenly, in the distant forest of the Dark Continent within the Cursed Lands, a massive dark shadow begins to take form. The looming presence stands as a clear omen of disaster, raising the question of why it has suddenly appeared. A mysterious figure steps forward before the massive shadow, addressing it as Your Holiness and declaring that the time has finally come. In return, the shadow calls the figure a cardinal and states that there is something important they must discuss. Meanwhile, Takuto and Atu are staring in shock at what they've just created. Using their mana, they summon a long-legged bug from the scout unit. The moment the creature takes shape, both of them feel a wave of disgust. Even though they had seen its 3D model countless times inside the game, facing it in reality is far more unsettling than they ever imagined. Takuto, unsure of the next step, commands the bug to scout their area. He tells it to avoid contact with other creatures if possible, all in the name of the great nation of Monobra. He assigns the bug the task of survival, essentially sending it out to explore. The insect obeys without hesitation and departs. Atu feels uneasy at first, but quickly realizes the creature's true purpose is simple: to follow the orders of its unit leader. Takuto even has the ability to share part of the bug's vision, allowing them to see through its eyes. For now, everything seems to be going smoothly. Atu then asks Takuto about his remaining mana. He explains that he started with 200, but after summoning the bug, he only has 100 left. While it's possible to create almost anything with enough mana, the cost of emergency production is extremely high. Atu wants to show her determination to do her best as part of the militia, but as a unit hero her strength only grows with time. Right now, her combat power is just 3, meaning if she runs into an enemy of level 5, she could easily be overwhelmed. This slow growth is one of the main reasons why Minogra is considered such a difficult nation to play. The planet itself is already set at a high difficulty, but that's simply the nature of this place. Meanwhile, the bug continues scouting the area, giving Takuto a clear look at the terrain. From its perspective, it's obvious the landscape is dominated by massive stretches of forest. Takuto concludes that the forest is indeed vast. Atu then points out that they still haven't discovered any food icons, nor have they run into enemies like animals or monsters. That's why using it carelessly right now would be dangerous. Still, gathering information about their surroundings is critical. Both of them have mana left, but wasting it recklessly is not an option. Forest terrains usually grant a concealment effect, which works in favor of Takuto and Atu. Still, the complete absence of wildlife feels strange to both of them. Even so, they decide to continue scouting a little longer. Atu feels sad and apologetic for not being of much use, but for Takuto, her presence alone is more than enough. Hearing this from her king fills Atu with joy. Meanwhile, Takuto drifts into thought, wondering if her cute and gentle nature was part of her original personality, or something that developed over time. Catching him lost in thought, Atu suddenly asks if he is really listening to her. At that very moment, Takuto receives a signal from the bug and immediately shares its vision with Atu. They come across a dark elf settlement, confirming without a doubt that they've been transported into a fantasy world. Dark elves were generally considered neutral, though they often leaned slightly toward evil. This realization brings a small sense of relief. However, Atu warns that they could just as easily be lawful dark elves, and if they belong to another nation, the situation could turn grim very quickly. Being this close to another nation so early on could easily bring unfavorable consequences. For now, they decide it's best to gather more information about these dark elves before making any moves. But fate doesn't wait for them. As they continue surveying the area, their eyes suddenly widen in shock and confusion. To their dismay, some dark elves have already discovered their presence. The scene shifts to the harsh journey of the elves as they make their way through the vast and unforgiving forest. Every step is a struggle against the brutal reality of survival. Most of the group is already on the brink of death, even the children, despite having been given priority when it came to resources. Captain Gia watches the situation unfold, his thoughts grim. He is convinced they cannot continue traveling like this. As he sinks deeper into worry, a voice suddenly calls out from behind him. It is Molter, one of the elders among the elves. Gia acknowledges his presence but insists that no matter what advice is given, their problems remain unsolved. With a heavy heart, Molter replies, showing his understanding of the dire situation. But before they continue, Molter urges Captain Gia to listen. Knowing how serious their situation has become, he warns Jia that the cursed forest stretches across the edges of these unexplored lands. Though the forest appears lush and full of life, Molter insists there is a dangerous force lurking deep within it, an evil presence that fills him with dread. Jia, caught off guard, demands to know what this evil presence truly is. But Molter falls silent, refusing to explain further, only stressing the importance of caution while traveling through the woods. Even with such a grim warning, the reality of his starving people leaves Jia no room to hesitate. He refuses to compromise their survival, though he fully understands the weight of the risk they now face. In order to avoid certain death, Captain Jia decides to search every part of the forest for food. Even though Molter warned him about the strange and dangerous nature of this forest, Jia dismisses those concerns, believing them to be nothing more than superstition. Driven by the urgent need to find food, the group pushes forward. Eventually, Jia comes face to face with Takuto and Atu. His eyes immediately lock onto Takuto, who appears to him as a pitch-black spirit shadow, an embodiment of evil wearing the shape of a human. Jia hesitates, wondering if this being is truly a manifestation of malevolence, unable to see beyond the darkness surrounding him. Realizing that his choices now could determine the fate of his entire race, Jia feels the heavy burden of responsibility. Choosing his words and actions with extreme care, Jia lowers his head in respect before Dudo. Introducing himself with dignity, he declares that he is a dark elf of the Mazer clan and the captain of the Dark Elves. Captain Jia and If respectfully address Dudo as a noble being, offering sincere apologies for entering his forest without permission. But Atu steps forward, her voice sharp, questioning whether Jia truly understands the seriousness of trespassing into a foreign land. She condemns it outright, calling it a sin. Pressing further, Atu demands to know if Jia has any valid excuse or reason to justify such a transgression. Realizing that every word matters, Jia carefully begins to explain the situation of his Dark Elf clan, the Mazaru. He recounts how they once lived in a land at the very center of the Idia continent. Yet, aware of the possible threat posed by Dudo, who appears closely tied to the dark spirit shadow, Jia speaks slowly and cautiously, hoping to ease her suspicions. Unfortunately, his careful tone backfires. Atu grows impatient, cutting him off and demanding a brief, straightforward explanation. Fear spreads through Jia and his people, their unease clear as the weight of her judgment hangs heavy in the air. Captain Jia quickly explains that his people were persecuted and driven from their homeland, leaving them with no other place to turn. This desperate struggle led them to seek refuge in the forest. Regret lingers in Jia's voice as he realizes his lengthy explanation might not have fully conveyed the severity of their plight. Dudo, seemingly disinterested, shows no sign of wanting to hear the full account. Then, to everyone's shock, Takuto suddenly speaks, his words cutting through the silence as he questions how the Dark Elves had become so weak. The unexpected moment stuns them all, as none had imagined the MC could actually communicate. Struggling to gather himself, Jia responds, explaining that the persecution his people suffered was merciless, forcing them to abandon everything and flee into this unfamiliar land. In search of safety, they took shelter in a place along the way, but their supplies eventually ran out during the harsh journey. Desperation drove them deeper into the forest, hoping to find food, but they discovered nothing. Frustration once again grips Captain Jia, realizing that his explanation strayed too far and failed to provide a direct answer. Pressing on, he reveals the harsh truth of their suffering. His people had gone several days without a single bite of food. In their desperation to survive, they were forced to bow their heads and beg for mercy. Still, a heavy fear lingered in Jia's heart, the dread that even after lowering themselves, the dark spirit might punish them. All he truly wished for was the peace and happiness of his clan. Inwardly, he questioned whether the simple desire to survive could really be considered a sinful act. The situation grew more complicated with every passing moment. Then, in a sudden and unexpected twist, Takuto drops an apple before Jia. Breaking the silence, Dudo calmly remarks that it pairs well with rabbit. The Dark Elves, who had never laid eyes on such a fruit, stare in awe at the apple. Its sweet fragrance and the heavy, juicy weight in their hands make it feel like a rare treasure, an unknown delicacy from another world. Generously, Takuto provides even more apples, and the elves, upon tasting them, are captivated by the sweet flavor and refreshing juiciness. Yet Captain Jia sternly warns his people not to eat the apples so recklessly. Then, to their astonishment, Takuto goes even further, offering them pars. The elves freeze in shock, especially Gia, who is left speechless at the sight of this mysterious fruit they have never seen before. Atu steps forward, urging Gia to accept the gift from the king, stressing its importance and meaning. The other elves, unable to resist, eagerly begin feasting. But Gia, though his body trembles with hunger, refuses to eat. Instead, he bows his head and pleads with Dudo. Give these precious fruits to the starving children first. The women and children of their clan, weakened to the brink of collapse, are in desperate need. With selfless resolve, Gia begs for this act of kindness to be granted to the little ones who suffer the most. In silence, Takuto and Atu watch the elves with heavy expressions. Deep within a secluded part of the forest, a dark elf mother sits beneath a towering tree, gently cradling her child in her lap. With tears glistening in her eyes, she hums a soft lullaby, soothing the little one, whispering that there is nothing to fear. Just as the child begins to drift into slumber, Captain Gia arrives, urging them not to sleep just yet. In his hands, he carries freshly mashed fruits, brought by the other men who soon gather around. With relief washing over her, the mother takes the food and carefully feeds it to her child. Slowly, the little one stirs and opens his eyes, life returning to his gaze. Grateful voices rise as the elves thank Gia for saving them. Together, they prepare the fruits and share the meal. Though their clothing is worn and their bodies frail, joy fills their faces as they savor the nourishing food, even in the midst of their poverty. The night spreads its wings overhead. Gia's assistant approaches and informs him that only one sack of fruits remains. A wave of relief washes over Gia as he looks upon the precious provisions before him. She expresses her gratitude for this life-saving bounty. But Molter, after hearing the full story, cautions Gia that Tudo might not have acted out of pure benevolence. Molter warns that Takuto likely expects something in return and advises Gia not to use respectful words like his benevolence when referring to Udo. Gia, however, feels a surge of anger and defends his choice. He emphasizes that Takuto was their only hope to save his people from starvation. Regardless of any hidden motives, Takuto's aid had given his people food and allowed them to finally sleep in peace. Gia urges his people to focus on the fact that their desperate situation had been eased, even if Takuto appeared to them as an enigmatic and possibly malevolent being. With sorrow in his voice, Gia bows his head and asks Molter what else he could have done in such dire circumstances. Meanwhile, Atu grows angry at Tudo for recklessly using up all their mana to create the fruits. Takuto responds calmly, explaining that their story had moved him deeply. He felt compelled to help, even if he feared it might still not be enough for their survival. Back in the forest, Atu falls into silence, unable to hide her frustration. Eventually, she shifts Tudo's attention back to the subject of mana. The dark elves return, bowing low before him. Despite Takuto's attempts to stop himself, he once again produces more fruits. By invoking an emergency production policy command, he generates enough provisions to sustain everyone for a long while. Atu tries desperately to halt him, but her protests are in vain. The dark elves, overcome with awe, call him a great being and express their heartfelt gratitude for his kindness. As Takuto tries to explain himself, he notices that Atu looks genuinely offended. It suddenly hits him that he should have been more careful with how he used his mono. Wanting to make things right, he asks for her help with something important, a task he cannot handle alone. Realizing her own mistake as a vassal, Atu bows her head and sincerely apologizes to her king for any unintentional offense. With a bright smile, she assures him that producing enough food won't be a problem. Curious about the specific help he needs, she asks him directly. Takuto explains that his real struggle is communicating properly with the Dark Elves during their earlier encounter. Atu, quickly understanding, reminds him that he played the role of a powerful king, one who values brevity and despises unnecessary chatter. According to Atu, Takuto's behavior had been flawless during their encounter with the Dark Elves. Even if his words weren't perfectly delivered, she insists there was nothing wrong with how he handled it. Still, Takuto can't shake the heavy feeling inside. The thought that he might have a communication disorder stirs old wounds, and memories of his past struggles begin flooding back. He recalls every moment when his inability to communicate clearly held him back, weighing on him now more than ever. Overcome by emotion, his eyes begin to sting. Sensing his pain, Atu gently reassures him, urging him not to cry. She softly tells him that it's okay to make mistakes, reminding him that he doesn't need to bear the burden alone, that he can always rely on the guidance of his trusted allies. Trying to comfort him further, Atu adds that in this game-like world, any obstacle can be overcome with the right balance of wealth and military strength. But before the weight of her words can fully sink in, their moment is shattered. Out of nowhere, a bug bursts onto the scene, letting out a loud, piercing scream. Even though Atu scolds him, it turns out Takuto had accidentally brought the bug back to their base. In the middle of this chaos, Takuto suddenly experiences a vision, realizing that the Dark Elves are on their way back to him. This unexpected turn of events adds another layer of tension and intrigue. As the Dark Elves approach, Takuto assumes they might have come to claim the remaining food. Unsure of how to respond, he hesitates. His struggle with communication weighs heavily on him, leaving him uncertain whether to ask them to leave or try to explain himself. The pressure of expressing his thoughts clearly while negotiating with the Dark Elves feels overwhelming. At that moment, Atu steps in with a confident plan, taking full responsibility for handling the situation. But then, something unexpected happens. Molter, the elder Dark Elf, speaks up and shows his respect toward Takuto. Molter conveys his gratitude for the aid they received, praising the delicious taste of the food. He introduces himself as the leader of the Dark Elf clan. Sensing that Molter has more to say, Atu urges him to speak openly before Takuto, encouraging honesty and directness between them. Atu herself seemed to enjoy taking on the role of a strong and cruel figure, while Takuto remained unsure of her true intentions. Molter then takes a moment to apologize for the discourteous actions of his fellow Dark Elves. With sincerity, he expresses his thanks, acknowledging Takuto's generosity in providing such vital supplies. He explains that their improper behavior stemmed from the overwhelming presence of standing before such a great being. Molter reassures Takuto that minor issues mean little when faced with a mighty king like him. Speaking on behalf of his entire race, Molter expresses deep regret for their earlier misbehavior. With humility, he asks for Takuto's name, acknowledging him as a figure deserving great respect. It is then that Takuto realizes, during their last meeting, he never actually introduced himself. Before he can respond, Atu seizes the moment. With a commanding voice, she declares herself the ruler of ruins, the queen of the apocalypse of the Dudo era. She stresses the importance of remembering Takuto's name, demanding that the Dark Elves always address him with honor. Molter steps forward once more, offering heartfelt thanks and recognizing how much Takuto's aid has meant to their tribe. Atu then introduces herself as well, but makes it clear that no one is to use Takuto's title when speaking to her. Molter solemnly promises that his people will never forget Takuto's name, honoring him as the hero who saved them. Though everything seems to have gone smoothly, Takuto notices Atu is still firmly committed to playing her role. She orders the Dark Elves to take the food before it spoils and depart. Just as Atu moves to conclude the meeting, Molter interrupts. With sincerity, he asks for guidance on how the Dark Elves might repay Takuto's kindness. Atu counters his request, insisting he promise something that would truly satisfy the king. But Molter, after a pause, admits that they have no idea what they can possibly offer. Even with his honesty, Atu refuses to accept anything meaningless. If they cannot present a genuine gesture, she will take nothing at all. From the side, Takuto quietly watches the exchange, wondering if Atu is simply growing bored of the situation. He only hopes the meeting can end peacefully. Yet Molter persists, determined to express gratitude. Atu, unwavering, continues to decline, her tone sharp as she questions whether his insistence hides another intention, perhaps even a plot. Inside his mind, Takuto repeats Atu's name again and again, silently begging her to stop. Outwardly, he keeps a smile on his face, but deep down he knows the situation is turning dangerous. All he wants is for Atu to bring her actions to a halt before it goes too far. With a sharp glance, Atu discreetly remarks that the Dark Elves are not skilled negotiators. Takuto, smiling faintly, holds back from mentioning his own struggles with communication. Still, he can sense Atu's unease. She worries that letting the Dark Elves leave freely could create future risks, even considering the extreme option of eliminating them altogether. Seeking a more positive path, Takuto suggests that perhaps the Dark Elves are looking for a mutually beneficial agreement. After all, simply surviving this encounter won't fix their real problem. They still have no secure place to stay, and continuing to live in misery is impossible. Yet being evil-aligned, Takuto fears the Dark Elves might already harbor suspicion toward them. To prevent matters from worsening, Takuto resolves to help Molter, the elder dark elf, but with a condition. He would ask for something in return. Etiyu's eyes light up, intrigued by the idea. She eagerly awaits his proposal. Then, with a sly smile, she points out that the dark elves believe Takuto to be some evil dark spirit. Her words startle Molter, who quickly denies it. But Etiyu silences him, commanding him to listen. She declares that the king has chosen to accept tributes in exchange for offerings. Looking directly at Molter, she asks if this arrangement eases their worries.